This is Michael Woodward, and this is Season 2, Episode 28 of the Jumble Think Podcast.
T minus 10, 9, 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1.
Welcome to the Jumble Think Podcast. We explore the ideas and dreams behind some of the leading entrepreneurs from around the world. Along the way, we will give you some tips and ideas of how you can chase your own big ideas and dreams and change the world around you. Our guest on today's episode is Jason Treu. More about Jason in a moment. On Thursday, we're having one of our special episodes where I get to share about a topic. Thursday's topic is all about how you can better communicate your big idea. Now let's join today's episode with Jason Treu. Hey there, welcome to the Jumble Think Podcast. My name is Michael Woodward. I am your host and super excited about today's episode. Before we get into today's episode, I want to encourage you, wherever you're listening to this podcast, click that subscribe button. And if you're listening through the Jumble Think website, I want to encourage you, click one of those buttons and go to your favorite place to listen to podcasts. Places like Apple Podcasts, iTunes, Google Play, iHeartRadio, Spotify, SoundCloud, and Stitcher. Once there, make sure you click that subscribe button. That way you never miss another episode of the Jumble Think Podcast. Now let's get to know today's guest, Jason Treu.
My name is Jason Treu. My business is Jason Treu Executive Coaching. And the role of my business is to work with executives, entrepreneurs, and rising stars to help them maximize their leadership and performance, and many times really architect their career blueprint. You know, my big idea started probably 10 years ago. I started to realize that I was really good at understanding human behavior, how people worked, and could anticipate their needs. And how I sort of figured that out was I came to Dallas and I didn't know a single person. And when I started to write and that was, in 2004, and I quickly sort of realized how to build relationships, how to go about the process in sort of a large scale. And when I wrote my book back in 2014, I took a quick swag at how many people that I knew at least decently well or had a few interactions with in Dallas, and that was like 15,000 people. So, at that point, I realized that there was something I could do, and then I had people come to me that were moving other cities and trying to figure out what to do. So I just started helping people really with the basic thing of like, how do you build a social life? Like, how do you move? How do you transition yourself? And that was the essence and nugget of the big idea. And then I approached someone with a business concept of just doing something like that and seeing if it would work, and then expanding that into something larger. And I leveraged someone's existing business, so there was really no cost, there was really no downside, and I was still working, full-time in corporate America. I find fulfillment in what I do because every person that I have coached and helped has had both not even a business breakthrough, I would say like a life-changing event, both personally and professionally, that has made a profound effect on their ability to lead, their ability to manage, grow their business, make their dreams come true. And then I think feel a sense that they had meaning in this world and they had a purpose to be there, and that they were really helping and inspiring other people. What I do matters because I help individuals and organizations realize their potential by helping the people that lead or are part of the organization to really flourish and find their own fulfillment. And the way that I do that is by helping them remove their blind spots, the patterns that have really been holding them back and causing them the most problems and that sabotage their success. And when you do that for someone, it's like being blind and being able to see for the first time. It's pretty amazing to watch and see. And what happens then after that is they'll have some huge event that'll happen in the organization that will be game changing for them. Everyone around will know and will come up to them and tell them that. And I think to hear those stories back from people is not only fulfilling and gratifying. I know that it's making a considerable difference and impact on people, because those people are hiring people. Those people are, in the economy buying things. And so it's a spiral effect. I think the challenge is there's just not enough time in the day. And there's so many competing ideas and options and things to do. You can only go so fast. So I think it's having patience. Sure, it's outsourcing to people, but I found that at some level, if you try to outsource too much, you have another problem, which is, you have people who really aren't you trying to be you. And I think that is not good either. So it's trying to find some of that balance and to be able to grow your business and then come up with new ideas and constantly inject those back in the business. Because I find a lot of people who do what I do, they rest on their laurels, right? They're not always learning. They're not at the cutting edge of what's going on. And in order for me to help my own clients, I have to be at the cutting edge of the things that I'm doing and investing in myself, constantly learning and pushing myself. I think one of the things that I'm trying to do now is work on team building, and we'll talk about that later, because I think building effective teams is what a leader or manager ultimately does, right? They're a people manager. And I think people can't do that or don't do that very well. And as I'm looking through, Fortune's top workplaces and Forbes top workplaces, and I'm talking to people who are leaders in those organizations and understanding some of the leadership development and things that are going on, I see that there are significant flaws. And the huge flaw I see is the lack of self-awareness. And what I mean by that is that if you don't understand the patterns that have been controlling your whole life since a little kid and that are actually damaging you now, you can't operate in the external world at a higher level, right? Your self-awareness will never be higher than your social awareness. And most people's self-awareness, meaning 90% of the people, is extremely low.
In a moment, we'll join our interview with Jason Treu. But first, we wanted to let you know about a couple cool resources we have over at jumblethink.com. We have 2 free guides that you can download right from our website. The first guide is how to know when you have found your dream. Our second guide is overcoming the unknown. These 2 guides are very helpful for those people who are new to the world of chasing their big ideas and making them a reality. Swing on over to jumblethink.com/guide. That's jumblethink.com/guide to download your free guides from Jumblethink. Now let's jump into our interview with Jason Treu. I am super excited about today's guest. Jason, thanks so much for being on the podcast. How are you doing today?
I'm doing fantastic. Thanks for having me on your show and speaking to your fantastic tribe.
Well, I'm excited to have you on. I've watched your TED Talk. I've read through your book. I love some of the stuff you're creating. But even more importantly, I love what you stand for. Tell us a little bit about your journey, because you have an interesting journey of New York to LA to San Francisco, and now you're in Dallas. And along that journey, you made some discoveries that really set you up for the foundation of what you're doing today.
Yeah, I mean, I think with every entrepreneur, it's a very windy road, and it's a lot of ups and downs. And the people that tell you that's not the case, they're not telling you the truth, right? Yeah. I mean, I think that, I found that even talking to some of my mentors and coaches, they have significant highs and lows along the way, right? And it's constantly reinventing yourself. So that's everyone, right? So, I think the first really major inflection point, that I had in my journey was, growing up, I went to a Jesuit high school. And one of the things that I think people don't really understand is that really religion, although that was part of it, it really it was in the backdrop, right? We got together 3 or 4 times a year for some sort of organized mass or whatever. But most of the time, other than that, it was on education and helping other people. And, our motto was being men for others. And at that time, it was an all boys school. So it was really helping, giving and inspiring in our time. And we had to do that as well. And so that really put me, I think, in a different place, because I really valued that And that was a big part of who I was as a person. So,
Right.
as I went, through school, undergrad and then into grad school, I wanted to go to law school. I thought that I could be helping people. And, I got my master's in communications as well. And I thought I might go into crisis management or something like that. And then I was interviewing in my second year for summer internships, which basically set you up for your job.
Right.
And essentially during the interviews, you interview with people from associates, so it's a lower level people that just joined, to people who are senior partners in a firm. And, I had some great interviews, met some great people, but at the end of every interview, I was told by third year law students that I should ask some easy question to wrap up the interviews, which is pretty normal, right? And that's not outstanding realization that they told me, but that's just what we did. So at the point, I asked a really naive question. I didn't really understand how naive it was until obviously I was a little bit older, or actually after the interviews, was, are you happy?
Yeah.
And I found that every person that I asked that question to, it was the longest question for me asking it and then pausing and then answering it, right? And when you get 30 some people that do the same thing, you notice it as a pattern, or at least I did. It really stood out. It took a while for me because you didn't really make the connection between all that was going on. But after all those interviews, I thought to myself, like, there's a glaring problem here. Either these people aren't happy, that they're just telling me they are, or they really had to think about it and wonder if they actually were happy and never really had considered the possibility that happiness was part of the equation, right? And you can equate happiness with fulfillment. That's what I looked at it, right? Not just, because happiness can be fleeting, but I looked at it as something higher. And so then at that point, I was like, what makes me think that I can do something that 30 some really smart, brilliant people cannot do, right? That is that's like going and playing in the NBA and thinking you're going to be the next Michael Jordan, right? I mean, the chance that that will ever happen in our lifetime is between slim to none. And so you're setting yourself up for massive failure if you think that you're going to be able to do what no one else has done. I don't think that's real. I don't think that's realistic, especially when everyone surrounding you isn't. Right. Maybe if you're doing a startup company, that's something different because you don't have that negativity and that structure to work within, but you're just not going to change what other people are doing all around you by just showing up and saying things. So, at that point I was like, I really wanted to do technology. Went out to Silicon Valley and, I got to work with Steve Jobs, Mark Cuban. People at Pixar, all these pretty large organizations, working at a marketing agency, which was the number one in Silicon Valley, and all these venture capitalists and all these great people. So it was a tremendous experience for me. And then I decided to move to Dallas because we had the huge downturn and I just wanted to be closer to my mom. And, and then this was circuitous route too. I went to Austin. I had a job. And I had a really good job, and my boss and I got along, and he's still a mentor of mine today. And I went down there flew down for like the final things that I had to go complete.
Yeah.
And he drove me he's like, I have a better job for you. And I'm like, okay. And it's in Dallas. And ultimately I really wanted to go to Dallas to begin with. So he drove me to VP of Marketing's house, and I met with him and got a job in a startup company. And instead of moving to Austin, I moved to Dallas. So it was and that was a fun time. And then as I got on, I got more disillusioned with being in corporate America. There were so many ups and downs, and I started to realize that when I looked at purpose as something external to me. Mm-hmm. And that's, something I'd read about, for a long time. And so I made my purpose statements, right? And I found that those purpose statements always worked for a little while, and then it never worked. And then I started to read more on purpose and kind of put things together in my own head. And I realized that purpose isn't something external to you, it's something internal. Okay. And people have gotten purpose wrong.
Right.
And purpose is tapping into the emotions that drive you, because then you're at your own peak state and you can give a lot more to people. Because the reality is that your purpose statement is, I'm here to help other entrepreneurs be successful, or I'm here to do whatever for people. Well, here's the wake up call. Everything external to you will let you down, and they will let you down in a big way and disappoint you.
Okay.
And so if you outsource your power to the world around you, you will live in peaks and valleys on a consistent basis, like all the time. And the valleys will start to affect you over time. But if your purpose is the emotions inside, you are constantly in control of the whole thing. So I realized that my purpose really was connecting and belonging. And that was what drove me. And when I was working in corporate America, it was great when I was lunches and things external. But then when I was back in the company and had to deal with all the internal things, I found that I just was not operating as well, not doing as well. And so I was like, there's something has to be wrong here for me to be in this environment. And then I experimented, with doing, some different stuff. I found someone, that had an existing lifestyle coaching business to help people basically build a social life. I mean, it was something really small and I could leverage their business. And I wanted to turn that into something more business oriented. I never really wanted to do something like that small. It was just really for me to test and seeing, okay, is this nugget and the information that I have, right, is going to be useful. And as I was doing that, what I learned was that what happens internally for people is the key driver in how they do things externally, meaning that their self-awareness is attached to your social awareness and never higher.
Yeah.
And the key is to work on your blind spots and other patterns from the past that are holding you back, traumas that you aren't dealing with. And that affects your ability more than anything else, because I was having challenges with some people in replicating what I was doing. And I realized at some point when there's multiple people, it's not them, it's you. And so I started to seek out people that were doing behavioral changes. I talked to some therapists. I put a lot of different pieces together and how to do something super fast, because smart, successful people have an attention span of a gnat, right? So you can't go through a year-long therapy process for people because they just won't do it, right? But, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 weeks, people will. Right. And if you can do it that fast and get results for 90% of the people that don't have some deep seated issues, right, or challenges where they really need, intensive work and a medical practitioner, you can really uplift people. So I started to do that, and then do that with my, coaching and executive clients. And the massive difference in their performance levels and what happened around them, their ability to lead, their ability to manage, their ability to build businesses, their ability to invest, their ability to build out a network, their ability to do acquisitions and mergers, and like everything else was at a massively higher level because they were completely clear and they didn't have a clutter internally that was bothering them. And then when they're having issues, like every successful person that has imposter, they feel like they're an imposter, right? Well, when they're doing that, they understand that they're in that mode, and then they can take action, right? They're aware of their emotions, and they're aware of other people's emotions. And those two things are what drives business and drives business success, because you can be the smartest person in the room, and if you're not aware of what's going on in other people, you won't be successful. And even if you are at a certain point, you'll hit a ceiling, and that will eventually bring you down.
Okay, so there's a lot to unpack there. So let's step back a little bit. You mentioned something pretty profound. You went into these interviews and you asked this simple question about, are you happy? And it seems like the simplest questions, sometimes the simplest issues, can be some of the most complex things to unpack. And you went from there into the place of purpose and finding fulfillment and creating those purpose statements. Why is it that simplicity, simple questions can often be the ones that hang us up the most?
Because I think there's a heavy complexity underneath them, and we have to look in the mirror,
Okay.
and we have to stand in massive discomfort,
Right.
and we have to do that by ourselves,
Right.
and we have to deal with all of the issues and crap that we have in our life and have had.
Yeah.
And we just, as human beings, right? Our brains are set up for survival,
Right.
not fulfillment and success. And mean by that is that, like, it's why you can see problems in other people very clearly and know and can help them what to do. It's like I tell some of my friends, like, you know, I have a lot of great friends that are like Oprah, right? They can see all the problems going on, but when they look at themselves, they can't see anything, right? And that's the way your brain is wired to keep you surviving, because if you could see everything, it would cripple your ability to interact with the world around you, right? So you're not the problem, it's your brain, and that hasn't evolved since, you know, the beginning of time.
Yeah, that's really, really good. So in that internal dialogue, as you're going through that, answering that question for yourself, trying to discover it, try to figure it out, as you saw others struggled with it, whether they were happy or not happy, how did you process through those questions and really create this compass for your future trajectory?
Well, I think that it's funny because I just heard this interview last year, and it's something I sent out to all of my clients as my favorite interview from 2017 on a podcast. And it was this guy, David Goggins, who was a former Navy SEAL, Army Special Forces. And, you know, something in the interview that he said really resonated with me is that he said that there's the two things. There are difference between drive and motivation, right? Motivation is just like entertainment and it's fleeting.
Yeah.
But drive is a much deeper thing. But people don't understand drive, right? Drive is not saying I'm going to get up every day and train for a marathon and actually do it. Drive is actually going a level deeper and saying to yourself, what am I lacking inside of myself that makes me do this, right? What don't I have right now? Because then you're standing in front of your own accountability mirror naked and asking the real tough questions that you have to answer. And if you don't do that, you just won't be successful.
And I love that. We've talked about that on this podcast with a couple of our guests before, that drive versus motivation. Everyone's looking for motivation, but they don't realize that the drive is really what's missing. And I think that's so significant. It's a subtle change, but it's really a mind shift change to take it deeper into that place of really propelling yourself to the next level.
Yeah, because it's like people will say to me, I want to be successful. Well, why? And they'll say whatever. And I'm saying, no, tell the real truth. Why do you be successful? Yeah. It's because you don't want to go out with your friends who are telling stories and make you feel like you're really small and you don't matter. Okay. So you feel like you don't matter and you don't mean anything. Okay. Well, when's the first time you felt like you didn't matter? Right. Yeah. And then you go back into, you know, when mommy and daddy told you that you weren't worth anything, right? And you'd never be successful. And now we're getting to the heart of the matter. You grew up always looking for something and wanting to be someone else and not you, right? Well, then, like, that's the real reason, right? Yeah. And when you dig there, then you ultimately are set free, because now you understand why you've done what you've done over the course of your life. And that it's not because you're broken or a bad person or incomplete. It's just you acquired that pattern because you were a blank blueprint, and people who loved and cared about you were trying to do the best that they could, but they, you know, inflicted that and those thoughts on you, and you took them as real, and you created that story, and that's been the story of your life. So now you have to change that story by taking new actions and understanding why you're doing it. So, like, that's the key, even with my own clients, right? I mean, in super successful people, I'm working with chairmen of billion-dollar companies, and they don't have any different thought process than someone who is, you know, a plumber, right? And it's not like because someone is appearing to be more successful that they don't have the same challenges and the same internal issues.
Yeah, it's that Simon Sinek thing of finding your why and using that as a foundation, and going so much deeper into the questions. And you really mentioned it with your journey of the purpose statement of saying, you know, changing it from the internal are from the external compass of like, I'm here to do all of these things, into the internal really value and core of what you are, who you are, and how you operate.
Yeah, because I think the challenge is that's how you outsource your power. And that's what people do all the time, right?
Yeah.
And the problem is with that is when you're in business, right, and you're a leader, the key thing is there is no courage without vulnerability. But if you're worried about what people are going to think about you, it is really difficult to be vulnerable because you're setting yourself up for a huge issue, right? Because especially for men, because vulnerability is seen as weakness. So you just won't do that if you're worried about external things, right? And women, it's more body image stuff. So, but nonetheless, it's just a challenge for you to do that if you're focused on that. But if you look at it and saying, okay, I'm going to share myself, and whether these people respond or not, I'm going to move the conversation forward, right? And I think that it's a critical part of being successful and finding fulfillment in whatever you do is being able to sit in more and more discomfort in your life and learn to do it in a healthy way, right? Most people do it in a very destructive way, but the people who can live in a more uncertainty and discomfort, those are the people that are the most successful. Because as an entrepreneur, I think the thing you learn the most compared to people who are not is that life doesn't go A, B, C. It goes A, Z, L, Q, and the dots don't line up. The dots line up when you have the solution, but before then you have to go through the journey and the darkness, right? It's like turning a boat around. I tell people like that's my everyday life. There's no brakes on a boat. So when you want to stop, like you keep going in the other direction. And when you turn it around, you're not going at full speed. And it's only when you change the direction and like do the circle and are going in the opposite direction that you start to gain speed and momentum, right? And that lull in that period is the hardest point as a human being to live through because nothing's going on and it seems like everything's just falling apart around you.
Yeah. It's so good. And having that place of having the ability to observe and make those changes and shifts as you go along is so significant, so that you can stay on course instead of being distracted by things that really don't matter. And it's like that distraction of the world around us so often dilutes the things that we should be focusing on.
Yeah. And I mean, it's hard, right? And I think it's imperfect.
Yeah.
And I think for people to set up, like, I think sometimes people think like, I'm going to meditate or I'm going to find Zen or I'm going to be able to be focused all the time. Like, that's just not true, right? I mean, that's why when people tell you these stories, right, about people growing these businesses and being successful overnight, what they don't tell you is that they got some influx of business and then flatlined for years. Or they went backwards after year 3 and took a big dip, right? I talked to one of my coaches who has, a very low 7-figure business or, close to $10 million. And he had to fire everyone in his company after 5 years. And it took a big dip and risk of faith and everything else on his part because he knew the people that he had couldn't get to the next level. And how do you know that? He went to a mastermind by this guy, Jeff Walker, that he paid $150,000 to belong to for a year. Right. And he learned this from being a part of it. So there's a key thing is investing in yourself and you do learn, but that's a massive risk. So even though the business was that big, he knew that it could possibly he could fall, half the business could easily fall apart is what he told me. He said he realistically thought that could take that big of a dip. But he had no choice in order to go forward because he couldn't go forward anymore. So you got to realize that most people, when you talk about successful businesses, from what and I've had conversations with hundreds and hundreds of people who are starting businesses, it's usually somewhere between year 7 to year 10 where you see them get a significant amount of stability in it, but there's still influxes, right? I have a client of mine who's $1 billion business that, year 10, they had a huge issue and they were sitting on pins and needles whether it was going to exist anymore or not. Right. Like completely go down the tubes, like 0 left. Right. So you never really made it, right? And so the key thing is the ego is the biggest problem people have. And that is the thing that actually most executives and people that do it differently, they let their ego go and they know they don't have all the answers. And you'll hear people say that, but they don't really get the people around them. And you'll especially see this true with narcissists, and because narcissists don't see the world like we do, right? They see the world as people are extensions of themselves, and they don't want to have other ideas because then it's not them. And then they deem themselves as not as important. So I find this all fascinating.
Yeah, I do too. And, you think about it and it's easy to say, well, so-and-so's arrived, but that whole question of arriving, because, you talked about that business where the executive makes this $150,000 investment, and it's a massive pivot and change for the business. And I think it's, that's the choices that leadership has to make when they go, we are good, but we could be great, or we're great and we could be even better. And taking that risk where everything is going okay or survivable or profitable, and saying, yeah, but we could do something greater. And I think that's one of the challenges, I've talked about this before, that Apple's in right now with the shift of leadership, with losing their visionary in Steve Jobs. And they've become a status quo company where they're putting out solid products. They're creating great things, but they're not innovating at the level where they're shifting philosophies of culture, of how we do things and how we go to something we never even knew we needed or existed.
Yeah. And I think that the challenge in organizations I see at that level when you see great companies is that you have a visionary that is someone who is like, Steve Jobs-esque. And then you have someone next to them that is an operational genius that can control and help everyone else, right? Yeah. And when you marry those, you get something great. Now, a visionary can have some low-level mastery of operations or enough proficiency in it, and they have to, and vice versa. But you won't. You don't find people who do both, because they are non sequiturs, right? I mean, the people that you think can do both can't, right? They are then at a low level of mastery and creativity or something else, but you cannot be at a high level of both. It's not possible. I mean, maybe there's someone in history at somewhere, but I haven't found them yet. So, and I think with Apple, that's what you're seeing, right? Because I worked there with them, and I was with Steve Jobs, and could see it. Like, and he operated on a different level where I don't know if it would really have worked. He would have had a change, or there would have been a lot of problems, because Steve Jobs saw the world when I worked there in a really weird, I think, in a really authoritative way. And I don't know if you would have been a market leader at the level they are now if it had worked, because his world was 98% of what you did was complete crap.
Yeah.
Like 1% of it was like, okay. 0.9% of it was good. Or 0.99% like would have been like good. And then 0.0 would have been great. Right. Yeah. And it was so rare that you could ever do anything at that level, and you could never do it consistently, that you'd have to live in that pressure cooker. Right. So it's just an interesting world, and seeing if, because people talk about Apple all the time and how it would play out. And I think they would have had considerable different challenges. Right. I think he would have had a change. And I'm not sure, based on when you read, Pixar's book and everything else, if he could have. I think other people around changed, and he lost power in these places that put him in different ones. I don't know if he would have evolved as a leader. And I think that, obviously we'll never know that answer, but it's a pretty interesting one.
With that, I think it's a great place to segue into leadership and culture and creating it. How can we become great leaders? Or maybe a better question is, what do great leaders do differently from leaders who are just okay or good?
I think one of the things we talk about before is self-awareness. I think you have to go and do a deep dive into understanding your blind spots and patterns, right? Because here's an example. So I had a CEO that I worked with a few months ago, and this is a pretty typical one. So you can even use this as a broad-based example. Yeah. So I went in and he said, I have a leadership problem, right?
Okay.
And whenever someone says to me, I have anything external going on, I take it with a grain of salt because I know their self-awareness is usually not that high. So therefore, they're probably not that tuned in, or they're maybe directionally right, but not completely right. So I'm like, okay, great. And he's like, I know the team can be performing better. I have smart people, I believe in the company, blah, blah, blah. Right. Well, then I went to half the executive team. I talked to them for under 10 minutes apiece, right? Asked them a few questions. Yeah. And they all basically said he does not listen. Right. So if you go to someone who is CEO of a company, and I don't care if that company is making $100,000 or, 10 billion, and you go to them and say to them, you need to listen more. 99.9% of them will say, look, these people don't get it. They don't understand. They're not motivated. They don't see the bigger picture. They don't understand the complexities. They don't know what it is to run a business or manage a team. Like there's 5,000 excuses because people offload blame and emotions when they don't want to deal with the real issue. And when you pose a question like that, they don't actually have to. Because you don't know as a person, as a coach going in, whether that's true or not, because you haven't spent enough time with them. So that's not what I did, right? So what I did is that I started to ask questions and dug into his past and history and found out that, grew up in a family of 6. So he got rewarded for talking over people because he never would have gotten heard, right? So that was a payoff, was not to listen and was to scream and shout. He had other instances I asked him over his life, personally and professionally, that also worked its way out. So then I took that with the data I had from other people and said, look, because you are a very poor listener and you have learned that payoff your entire life for these other things that talk over people, that's the pattern. And the payoff is you got what you wanted and you were successful by not listening, right? Well, the problem is that pattern is no longer serving you here, right? And your leaders are going to quit. You are underperforming, and on a $500 million company, I bet easily that 10 to 20% of all your key metrics are lower because of lack of engagement. So you're probably sitting on $50 or $100 million here of more revenue you could be making every single year by listening, right? And so the choice is, what do you want to do? Do you want to be a better listener, or I actually asked them, I said, do you want to be right or do you want to be happy? And do you want to be successful? And of course, he's like, well, I never really thought about it like that. And I said, well, that's the truth. Like, so it's not that you're broken, it's just a pattern, right? Life comes down to pattern recognition. Well, we did a few simple things like talking last in their team meetings, right? Going around and knowing people on a more personal, deeper level. And there were just some other little small, these were all like 1 to 2 degree changes. They were nothing that was cataclysmic or like that put that much effort in doing. And within like 30 days, this stuff all turned around and everyone was much happier. And people thought that he was listening and he was being heard, right? Doing stuff like empathy, right? Every time someone said something, I said, now put yourself in their shoes before you answer the question and think how they're feeling and what's going on, and then answer the question, right? And then, in the beginning, you're not as good, but you get better. And he did. And it all changed, right? Because now he took that data and he internalized it. And so that self-awareness is the key path, right? But the second path forward is that you have to build a culture that is out of caring, right? That's ultimately the underpinning of really successful cultures. And it's something that people don't do, right? So I studied Google, and they have this, they did this study called Project Aristotle. Okay. And I was researching my TED Talk, and I think everyone should read it, because if you want to build a great business, all you have to do is copy what they did. They spent 3 years, and they hired researchers from all the key institutions to come in. They looked at all the patterns. They took their 180 top teams. They interviewed over 200 people individually. They looked at 250,000 separate pieces of data and analyzed them to try to build a perfect team, because they were essentially saying, we are going to have a program that is going to take the traits of our best people. We are going to hire them. We're going to look for them. We're going to revamp everything. And they couldn't find anything. They could not find anything across all the teams until one of the researchers came across a team where one of the managers said that he had stage 4 cancer and may die.
Wow.
And they saw the performance on that team had significantly jumped in the months afterwards.
Oh, that's
and
crazy.
so they figured out that psychological safety is the foundation for all great teams.
Okay.
And it was the only thing that all 180 of Google's top teams had in common.
Wow.
They had 4 other traits, but not all of them were on all the teams, right?
Yeah.
And psychological safety is a fancy word for caring and vulnerability, right? It's the ability for people to know people on a very deep personal level, to be able to ask crazy questions in meetings and bring up controversy ideas, and then just to ask any question you want without fear that you're going to look like an idiot, right? And when you can do that, you can revolutionize your business and compete at a level you never thought was possible, right? And in fact, Google believes it so much that they have this company called Project X, which they spend $1 billion on. That's a secret company that no one knows anything that's going on. They're working on flying cars, turning pond water into gasoline, and like all these crazy things. And the training that they do in day one is psychological safety training.
Wow.
And on top of this, I went into a lot of the sales teams and clients I worked with over the last 2 years and went in, asked people questions, looked at what was going on. And I found the differences that people felt like they cared about each other. The amount of brainstorming creativity went up. The amount of people helping each other went all up. And I realized that when people like each other, it changes the entire dynamic, right? And I don't know in all those instances, is everyone going to be friends on teams like that? No, right?
Right.
But
that would be impossible.
Right? Liking someone is caring about them, respecting them, and you are more invested in their success. And so that's one. The second thing that I found out was I was going through this research and found this professor, his name's Arthur Aaron. And back in 1997, pre-social media, the internet wasn't playing as big a role in our lives. He was trying to figure out, how do you make fast friends from people? Really fast.
Yeah.
And so he developed a question and answer game that he had people play. And he used with grad students that didn't know each other. He surveyed them out and knew they had no background, no information about it, and never met these people before. And over the course of 45 minutes of asking questions, they surveyed them in the beginning and the end. And 30% of the people considered the relationship they just formed as the closest relationship in their life.
Wow.
Just by asking questions, right?
Yeah.
So I started to think to myself, the key is to build psychological safety and a culture of caring and liking people. It's really getting to know people at a deeper personal level. And I think when you look at the level of loneliness in the US, it's at 40%. It's doubled over the last 30 years. And that's the that's the feeling of being alone, not actually being alone.
Yeah.
And loneliness, and people say, well, does that really matter? And I'm like, okay, well, they have now equated it to eating, drinking water, and shelter. You will die without it. And they've done now research, and they've said that if every day that you feel lonely is the equivalency of smoking 15 cigarettes.
Wow.
So if you do this over a prolonged period, you will die.
So it's that lack of community, lack of feeling like you have a tribe or a place in which you belong, a place that you're seen, a place that you engage and you're a part of.
Yes. And it's, and then you look at stats that if you have a best or good friend at work, you're 7 times more productive and loyal, right? Wow. I mean, when you create that sense of community inside of the workplace, your productivity goes up tremendously, right? I mean, if you look at the stats now, 70% of US workers are disengaged. It's costing $550 billion in productivity. It's just getting worse. I mean, you look at all the numbers. So now what happens is people go to work, and it's not just, they're not just work-life integration. Their work and their social life are one. Yeah. And so you, as a corporation, have to understand that, and you have to now help people thrive and create that sense of belonging, right? So, So I created this game, Cards Against Mundanity, and it's just a simple game where people sit around in a circle and start asking questions like, if you had a superpower, what would it be? And then deeper questions like, if you could pick one year of your life, which one would it be to do over and why? And when you start sharing this with people, you start learning about them. And what you find is that one of my favorite authors, Brene Brown, said in her latest book, it's hard to hate people up close up, right?
Yeah.
I mean, and the issue is that you dislike people that you don't know. But the people that you know up close, even if you don't agree with them, in many instances, you like and respect them, like family members, right? That you may not agree with, or even friends that take a different political viewpoint than you or something else, right? It's not that you completely throw them away. Well, when you start to get to know people you work with on a deeper level, you'll find immediately what happens. And what I found in doing this hundreds of times now is that people communicate better, they collaborate, they resolve conflicts, they're more invested in each other's success. And the reason is that they trust each other more. And the key component of trust is caring. When you look at all of it, it's the one component, even research and everything else you look at, that you can't discount. So when you sit around a table and you ask questions, right, you get to know people on a much deeper level. And you can do this, in 45 minutes and profoundly transform an organization. And you can even do this. I've done it remotely on Zoom. I've done it even in groups who haven't even been in the same room. And you'll see the effect go across other teams, because psychological safety is so powerful when you want to change something, because people then care at a deeper level, right? And then you think about when I interviewed managers of my clients and why that they care about their own success and what happens. And, I wanted to ask them to figure out, okay, why are you staying up to 3 a.m. doing emails or late at night working? And I thought the answers would be more personally motivated. But when it got down to it, I realized that why people do it is they felt like their manager cared, the leader cared, and they didn't want to disappoint them.
And it's hard to treat someone as a villain when you intimately know them. I look at people throughout history that look like horrible people, and when you really get to know their story, all of a sudden there's this revelation of, oh wow, there's a lot more going on here than what meets the surface. So if you do that at a level in which you work, it's even at a much more closely related place, so that you really start going, oh, this person, maybe they're going through something rough and that's why they're always sad at work, or maybe they're just not being fulfilled because their dream is really something else, and they thought that this job was going to fulfill it, but they need a different role, and all of those things really build into that place of seeing people for who they really are instead of who you perceive them to be from a distance.
Yeah, and you could do stuff in meetings. Like I've had clients do things like, we'll start off meetings, and especially a lot of times with meetings that are higher level, or you need engagement, by doing a temperature check, right? Saying people, is it sunny outside? Is it cloudy or storming? And give someone 30 seconds to explain where they're currently at. Because what happens a lot of times in meetings is that people are checked out. And the leader in the group wants to accomplish something, but no one's focused. So it's just basically, now we've just wasted probably what could be $10,000 meeting, right? And then nothing gets done. And so you've got to be doing stuff like that, or I'll people do stuff where they've had to build some relationships quicker, show pictures in the beginning of the meeting, right? Have everyone have 30 seconds and take a picture out and saying, why is it meaningful to them? And you'll see things like that. If you do that in a meeting, you think, oh, I'm wasting 5 or 10 minutes. It'll profoundly change the meaning that you will get back 10 times more to the meetings moving forward, and people will love going. Why? Every time it's the same, I do the picture thing out, because people think it's hokey. And then after they do it, like for 4 weeks in a row, they're like, oh my God, like this is like totally transformative in our meeting, right? We have everyone wants to go to this meeting more than any other meeting they have all week, like every single time. Why? Because it becomes meaningful, and the people in the room sense to be someone that they run across in the hallway, or they know this surface level bit. They actually know them as real people down deep. And that's where cultures go wrong. And when you look at HR policies, I saw someone on LinkedIn share something on their onboarding process, and you saw all of this stuff going on. And I thought to myself, every client I have and every person I interview that complains about their manager, about the company, what do they complain about? They complain that they get no career guidance. They don't get really leadership or management training that seems to work for them.
Yeah.
And then they also say that like they just don't feel like probably down deep a lot of people really care.
Yeah.
And like every person usually says 2 out of the 3, if not all 3.
Yeah.
But they never say like my onboarding process wasn't great. Well, I'm not really clear on my goals, right?
Yeah.
Like they know what they have to get done, because if it's not clarified, they'll make sure it is, because they know that they have to get goals and things done in order to get promotions and raises. But some of the things they can't do on their own. And building a culture and building, that feeling is something that, people who need to do, or managers, and as companies need to do a much better job. And frankly, I don't understand why, because they have a company that spent all this money on doing it and hired all these people. And even the top companies, you'll see them. I don't see anyone that says psychological safety, right? I mean, I've gone through it, and maybe I'm missing something, but Forbes top workplaces and Fortunes, I mean, like that is, if you look at even researchers and all the data out there, right? I mean, like it's hard to refute it, but people still feel like, and they'll name them some other things, but it's not what it is, right? Psychological safety is what it is. It's not just caring. It's way deeper than that.
Yeah. And when you say safe places, you're not talking like what we're seeing at the college campuses where we have trigger zones and all of that kind of stuff. You're talking about a place that's safe to be honest, vulnerable, to take risk, to throw out the stupidest ideas, and know that's part of the process, the creative process to discover where you should go. You have to toss out the dumb things, because that gets the things going. And it's a safe place in which you feel like you're seen and you're heard and you're a part.
Yes. And that is where it's transformative. And when you look at the most successful teams in any company, that is what you will see when you go in and sit in a team meeting with just them and no one else, and see how they react. Sit in the back of the room and sort of watch them like an anthropologist would or a sociologist would, and observe what's going on, right? You will see a different tenor in the room as compared to other groups in the organization. And it's because they have that in common, and that is proliferated inside of that group. And they don't understand it, right? They don't know why, it just is. But the problem is that when it doesn't go out through the whole organization, you're getting a very small group of people. Because if I switched out a couple of people and threw them from another sales team, those people would significantly do better, because they're in a better environment for them to succeed. So it's not all about how you're performing. It's the environment that you're in to perform. It's like a quarterback in the NFL, right? These days are system quarterbacks, right? You can put them in one system and they can play great, but you put them in another one and they're not doing really well. I mean, look at the quarterback in Minnesota. They almost got to the Super Bowl, and he was a marginal quarterback through his entire career. I mean, a backup, right? And he never, and every time he started, he didn't do very well. And he came out of the LA Rams and played horrifically, right? And then went in Minnesota, and they almost went, right? Because it's the system and it's the environment.
Well, the Eagles this year in the Super Bowl, their backup quarterback was able to thrive in a system that really just flourished, and everyone thought the team was dead. And here it's like, no, we're a team in which we see each other, where we know our roles, where we know our parts, and somebody else can step into the system and just flourish in it, because it's a system that works.
Exactly, right? And that's the same thing with other people. And so when you're building a business, I don't care if the business is 3 people, 2 people, or 20,000. It's the same principle. And when you can do this, a team of 3 people can compete against people that are 20, 30, 40, 50 people and win. Because they will have something that the rest of those people will not have. And that is something that's really powerful when you're doing anything, right? And you can translate this into working with partners, into working with clients, into working with other people, right? You could play the game Cards Against Mundanity. I've had salespeople play with their clients and other people, right? I mean, or business development people played. I mean, it's really getting to know people, right? And that people buy things from people, what we hear all the time, that they like, right? And they don't leave because they trust those people will solve their problems, and they'd rather have an inferior solution because they know when the chips are down, that person's going to come in and help them, right? Well, it's the same thing here. But instead of leaving it to chance and doing haphazard, if you just play a game of questions, which you don't need to then invent or do anything with someone else, you can get a results of what people, have not been able to do. And just to tell people who are saying to themselves, well, I know everyone in my company. I've worked with them for 10 years. And what am I going to learn about them? Well, I had someone say this to me about 6 or 8 months ago. And so I gave this game to people who've been married 10 plus years, who were in what I consider to be really great marriages, or friends that had known each other 20 plus years, that were best friends, right? That they were really close. I had all of them 10 people play this game. 10 out of 10 said to me that after playing the game for a little bit less than an hour, they learned information that fundamentally changed their relationship with the other people. And that the information they learned would have helped them understand the other person in a significant way, and they wish they would have known it earlier, right? And it's the fact that we just don't talk, and we don't engage, and we don't ask questions. And there's a lot of reasons why, but it doesn't happen. And so you really short circuit an organization, and you're short-sighted if you don't start to do this stuff and learn and model after, behavior and data that someone else has done, and it's showing you the path forward.
And along the way, what you're doing is you're making it really, really fun. And we all like doing things that are fun for us, not things that are painful. So the fact that this can be done in a fun way, in a vulnerable way, but making it fun really lowers the bar, the threshold in which people are going to resist this, that they're really going to step into it and see the fruit, see the potential outcomes of changing this culture, changing the shift of philosophy around what the workplace should be into what it could be.
And it has to be done fun too, because that's the only way people will really share and open up in doing it. Because the thing about what the game that really works and why it works is that if you go up to someone at work and say to them, I'd like to know, if you could pick 1 year of your life to do over, and which one would it be and why? They're going to look at you and say, you're weird. I feel unsafe. My brain goes into survival mode. Why are you asking me this question? What are you trying to get out of me, right? But if a card asks it, it's completely anonymous. Right? And so you have to do things that appear to have no agenda attached to them. And that's really hard. So you have to do it in fun ways, because then people feel like they can just throw it out and there's no judgment attached to it, or no one's looking for a specific answer. And so I think when you can do these types of things, on a quarterly basis in an organization, and they're free too, right? So anyone can do them. It's not like you have to be Google and have a big budget. Playing my game, you download for free. The picture game you can play for free, right? And people bring all this stuff is essentially all free. None of it really costs anything to do. And it's the most powerful stuff, right? So, they say that greatest things in life are free. Well, psychological safety is essentially free, right? Just that people don't want to do it because the fear is, I'm a leader, I have to lead, and I have to be vulnerable first to make it safe for everyone in the group to share. And the thing about vulnerability is no one wants to go first.
You have a lot of great resources. I want to make sure people know how they can find and connect with you. So how can people find and connect with all of the amazing things you're doing?
So you can go to my website. It's jasontreu.com, and it's Jason Treu, right? It sounds like Troy, but it's spelled Treu.com. And you can go and get Cards Against Mundanity at cardsagainstmundanity.com. And you can download the whole game and instructions, and there's a lot more information. It takes 5 minutes to set up. You can play it in 45 minutes in a group. And so that really works well. And you get my book, Social Wealth and How to Build Great Business Relationships, on Amazon. And there's a link on my website too. So, and then coaching is on there as well for, individuals and groups. And you can find all that good information under the services button.
We'll be right back with Jason Treu and our rapid fire questions. You have big ideas and dreams, but you don't know how to make them a reality. And you're sick and tired of waiting for one day or someday or the perfect day. Well, today I want to encourage you, start the journey of making that dream, that big idea, a reality. You don't have to do it alone. Swing on over to jumblethink.com, learn how we can help you, and drop us a note. We would love to be your coach and partner on the journey of helping your dreams and your big ideas become a reality. Again, swing on over to jumblethink.com, learn a little bit more about our consulting and coaching services, and drop us a note on our contact page. Now let's join the rapid fire questions with Jason Treu. We're back with Jason Treu to dive into rapid fire questions. Jason, are you ready for some rapid fire questions?
I am ready for some rapid fire questions.
I love these. They're a lot of fun. The first question is, what is one tip you would give someone with a big idea or dream and they don't know where to start?
Take one action that can move you forward.
Okay.
Because what I found is that it's an iterative process.
Yeah.
And so it doesn't matter. You just got to take action. So just get out and do it.
What is one change you'd like to see in the world?
I'd like to see that people could create a greater sense of creating belonging, connection with people, because I think that that's causing significant problems. I mean, we talked about loneliness before at 40%, and the last Surgeon General said that's the biggest health problem, and they've talked about it in the United Kingdom, the biggest health problem overall. Not just that, like, it's just something that we're worried about. It's causing massive things. So I think if people could create a greater sense of belonging, connection, you would see significant changes in the world around you in a positive way.
What do you want your legacy to be?
No, I want my legacy to be that I show people that you don't need to be held back by your past about what had happened.
Yeah.
Once you understand the patterns that had gone on in your life, it's just that you did what you thought you could do and were sort of programmed to do. But now, once you understand that, you can write the ending of your story and the next chapter, and you are fully in charge of that. And that you are powerful, because if you write a new ending and a new chapter, you're going to have massive effect on the people around you. And you don't really understand how powerful you are, because you don't get to touch all the people, or you don't get to understand the feedback of what you're doing.
Yeah.
But it is powerful for every single person.
Yeah.
And it's a shame for people not to use their own gifts, because you're saving people's lives, you're helping them. You just don't understand it because you can't get that feedback from that moment, but it's happening.
Where do you find inspiration?
No, I mean, I find them through my friends, through people I volunteer with, people who I work with. I go to conferences, podcasts, read. I mean, I try to find them in a lot of different places.
Okay.
And usually every day you can run into someone. If someone tells you your story, everyone has like a hero's journey if you pay close enough attention. And that's all inspiring, because someone's had to overcome great odds for them, right? Not maybe to you, but to them. Yeah. And that to me is inspiring, because that's the human condition.
What is one book you think every dreamer or entrepreneur should read, and why?
Well, my favorite author, and I give this book to every single client I have. I don't think it will ever end. And I give other books to people as well, but it's anything by Brené Brown.
Okay.
I mean, I think she is the best business and leadership author by far. And it's funny because she's a shame researcher. She's got one of the top couple most downloaded TED Talks, and she talks about vulnerability. And what's really funny is that I've heard her speak in podcasts, and she now has 80%, I think, of her speaking gigs and workshops are in, Fortune 1000 companies.
Wow.
So what she has to say will fundamentally change how you do business and interactions with other people, because it deals with the self-awareness, which will build out in your social awareness. This is vulnerability and courage. And I think all the things that we need to do to be successful leaders, the makeup of great leaders are. And once you read it, you get a much better understanding, I think, of how to work better with people, build better connections, which then will translate into significantly more success and at a higher level of fulfillment.
Speaking of success, what's one tool that is significant for the success of your business?
This may sound really trite, but it's the phone.
Okay.
Phone or Skype. Because, or the other part of it is actually more important, I guess, over that is trumping is just being in person.
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
It's having that face-to-face connection with people, but it's not typing messages to them. It's not social media. It's not a productivity tool,
Mm-hmm.
because that's not what builds lasting relationship. That's not what's going to build client referrals. That's not what's going to build successful people. So it's really the voice to voice. And I'd even take another level, probably more of in the face to face.
Yeah. Yeah. What is one habit you find helpful in your life as an entrepreneur?
I think it's really good to have, well, a couple things. One, you have to constantly be learning.
Okay.
And the modes of learning are things like podcasts, they're reading, they're going to conferences, they're getting coaching, they're going to classes. I think all of them at different modalities, and you have to consistently invest in yourself, both at a personal and professional level, if you want to stay at the top of your game, right?
Yeah.
The other thing is, I find having a personal goal is really important to have. Back in November, I thought to myself, I really needed to have some personal goal that was something bigger. And then I really had been doing so many business things that I attached to the personal goal, like a book or a TED talk.
Mm-hmm.
And then I was like, I'm going to start running. I want to do something, exercise more. And so I set a goal to, in 1 year, qualify for the Boston Marathon, which is almost impossible, right?
Yeah,
But
yeah.
I've been running, and I did I'm doing my third half marathon coming this Sunday since November. And I never ran more than 5 miles in straight ever in the beginning of November. Right. Wow. And now I'm running 35 to 40 miles a week. I've got a running group. I found a running coach. And so what's good about that is I have something else to fall back on when things in my business aren't going the way that I want them to go. Right. I see them to go. And every week is not going to be some massive high, right? You're not on one peak after another. So having something that's personally, and it's all yours and you're in control of, I find is something that's really important to have. And also then it pushes you, it drives you. You learn a lot about yourself, and you have to, and then the running a race and doing well and sharing with other people through a running group, like all this stuff, I think is really empowering.
Yeah. I wish you the best on getting to the Boston Marathon. That is an awesome goal. If you weren't doing what you're doing today, what would you be doing?
I thought to myself, like being some sort of psychologist or therapist, probably would be more of what I would be doing, because just human behavior, and it would be helping people that I'd probably find a lot of enjoyment and fulfillment out of. Although I'd have to find a way to do it in some non-traditional way, because the traditional way of doing it would be very constrained for me on a day-to-day basis.
How do you start and finish your day?
I start my day by doing a gratitude list, and I do it within like 10 seconds of things that I'm grateful for, meaning that I'll wake up and I'll say I'm grateful for 3 things. Like I'm grateful, this morning I said I'm grateful for my Jack Russell Terrier. He's 17 and keeps on ticking. I'm grateful that it's sunny outside. And then I'm grateful that I have a bunch of really, great meetings most of the day that I'll be learning from, participating in, and, something that will end up my day being different.
What is one dream you're still wanting to fulfill in your own life?
I have a lot of dreams, right? I mean, I'd like to build my business significantly better, impact people. I've got a personal goal in the short term of, qualifying and running the Boston Marathons. It's a pretty big one. Obviously I have my personal life stuff where, I'm not in a relationship with someone at this point, but, at some point I'd like to and be married and do that. So that is something that is definitely out there for me. And, I think it's just also just continuing to find the drive and learn and just be curious and seek, put myself in discomfort as much as I can, because I know that will ultimately serve me the best and push me.
As we wrap up today's episode, what's one last thought you want to leave us with?
You got to dig deep if you want to create great things in your life and be fulfilled. And you've got to ask the hardest questions possible. Things like, why don't I think I'm enough? You know, who do I think that I am? Why do I want what I want? What am I lacking in myself that I'm choosing to do these things for? I think when we can do those things, we get significantly more clear and clarity in our lives. It helps us make much better decisions, and it opens us up for other people to come in our lives in pretty significant ways. And also, I think it allows me to be vulnerable. And when you're vulnerable with other people, you allow them to be vulnerable with you, and then that creates amazing outcomes.
Jason, it's been a lot of fun having you on the podcast. Thanks for diving into uncomfortable topics and giving us solutions to really taking it to the next level and bringing breakthrough in these areas.
Hey, well, thanks for having me on the show and with spending time with your fantastic tribe.
Once again, we want to thank today's guest, Jason Treu, for taking time out, sharing his story, and giving us insights into so many important topics. As always, you can find links on how you can connect up with Jason in the episode notes. I want to thank you for tuning into today's episode. It means the world to us that you would listen to our podcast. I want to encourage you, if you have a big idea and dream, don't feel like you have to do it on your own. JumbleThink is here to help you. Drop us a note, hello@jumblethink.com, hello@jumblethink.com. Let's start the conversation on how we can help you make that big idea and dream a reality. Until next time, I want to encourage you, get out there and do something, whether it's small or big, to make your big idea and dream a reality.
Les mères de famille, les enfants, peuvent également prendre un moment revitalisant dans quelques mois. Lorsque vous aurez bien saisi la technique et que vous serez maître de votre corps, vous pourrez vous décontracter même en travaillant.